There's a secret way to gain skill in iRacing almost instantly, and no one wants to hear it. It's called having friends. Because one of the biggest advantages that you can have in a given race is having a good spotter and crew chief. Just simply having more information than the rest of the field is enough to put you in an advantageous state over any competition. So today I wanted to go over how to be a good spotter and crew chief for iRacing, specifically in ovals, but a lot of this does transfer over into all of their disciplines. I'm going to break this video up into 3 sections. The first on spotter calls, the second on coaching calls, and the third on strategy calls. And a quick thanks to my Patreon members for making this type of content possible. If you enjoy iRacing oval tutorial content, please consider joining the Patreon. There is amazing perks in there like monthly group lessons, video reviews, one-on-one lessons, you name it. First, the spotter calls. How can you be a better spotter than the default spotter that iRacing has, or Chad Knaus even? The main issue with the iRacing in-game spotter is that it will only call when a car is literally beside you. It can be less than a centimeter behind your car and it will not call anything, but even if it's completely correct, which it sometimes isn't, once it breaks that plane with your car, that's when you'll call it. And that's perfectly serviceable for most people. In fact, I do that for every single one of my races. But there is a huge advantage to be had in calling a car that is potentially going to end up somewhere or having momentum to end up beside you and calling that before it happens. For instance, that vortex of danger that a lot of road racers talk about doesn't really exist in oval racing. So if you leave a gap open on the bottom, somebody will very often try to shoot it and try to get under you before the corner. In that case, you won't know that they're beside you until they get their nose in there, and that is when the default spotter will make the call. And that's sometimes just too late, causing contact and a crash and just ruining your race. But with live spotting, you can make that call early enough so that the driver can change their line and drive a better line and hopefully a more defensive line that can fend off that move in the first place. Car looking outside, not there though. You can slide up, and then protect top. Yeah. Inside. Overcook this a little bit, you should be fine. You should be able to get on the outside of 2 here as well. Yep, inside. Keep it tight to the wall, Very good. Another thing that live spotters can do is tell drivers how far the cars in front and back of them are. Obviously, with the cars in back being a little bit more useful, they can get an idea of the momentum that the cars behind them are carrying, that they might have to rely on stuff like their relative or something like that. 3 back and gaining, 2 back for the corner. He's going high. He's going to be looking to pass you here off the corner. 1 back. You're going to get him. Clear. Still clear. On your bumper. Here are a couple tips for being a good spotter in iRacing and probably in general. Honestly, if you are a spotter in real life, I would love to hear your tips about spotting in real life. I know it's a little bit different because of camera angles versus in the stands, but it's an interesting conversation to have. The first tip I have is one that is practiced as much in real life as it is in iRacing, and it is being cool under pressure. A panicking spotter will lead to a panicking driver. So making your calls even-keeled, the same every time, just giving them the exact information, that is going to be the most beneficial to your driver. Still top 3. Clear to 2. Top 3. Still top 3. 2. Still 2. Tight. 2 tight. 2 tight. Still 2. Still 2 tight. And clear. Great first lap. Also, being on the same page with your driver on how much information they want and when they want to receive it. If they have to focus really hard on corner entry, you don't want to be yapping during there. So making rules like, I'm only going to give you hard information in the straightaways or at a certain point of the track, that's going to be a lot more beneficial if everyone's on the same page. Do you like having more yapping information or just the necessary information?
I like yapping. I like people saying knowing what someone's looking for in an attack.
Okay, I'll give you maximum information then. Always call things exactly the same every time. One of the worst things a spotter can do, especially at super speedway tracks where you're trying to help your driver navigate around a wreck, the worst thing that you can do is call something the opposite way. So for instance, if you say crashes high, but then the next time you say go high, well, you say high both times, but each time it means the opposite. So each time you want to stick with either crashes high or go high each time. So go low, go high, or crash high, crash low, and then let the driver figure it out themselves. That's a different school of thought to have, and you can do it however you want, but make it consistent for the driver. But the best bars on iRacing do much more than just make calls on car proximity. And for the second part of this video, we will go over how to be a good coach as you're spotting. And I know what a lot of people will say, oh, I'm not that good at iRacing, so why would I be a coach for somebody else while they're driving? Well, coaching is doing more than just saying what the driver is doing wrong. You might not know that, I might not know that, but what you can do as a spotter that no one else on the field has access to is watching other people's lines. Larry's the perfect guy to follow here. See how he's just letting it up? He's not using too much wheel to keep it down there. He's just letting the car naturally come up. During downtime, you can be almost like a field reporter to your driver saying what the fastest guys are doing, what lines seem to burn tires, what lines seem to be good on tires. You can just be perceptive about what other drivers are doing. Car behind you underdrove the corner a little bit compared to you, and he got a better exit. The best camera angles that I can recommend for spotting, a lot of people use blimp or chopper. I don't love those because they're always moving around. My favorite is to take the far chase cam and zoom it out even a bit more, and either being on my own car when there's no pressure out the back, or the car behind my car when they are in a little bit closer of a pack. That gives me good access to knowing what the car behind my driver is doing, while at the same time letting me have a good view of my driver and how they are comparing to everyone else and the other cars around them. Calling restarts is also very important while spotting. Sometimes your driver won't have a good view of the lead off the green flag, and they will be at a massive advantage on the restarts if you call when the leader goes before anyone around them is able to see it. If you are a little bit more advanced in iRacing though, it is very beneficial to be able to see when your driver is turning the wheel too much into the corner or when they are over slowing corner center. Basically just comparing them to what everyone else is doing and saying, okay, I think I know how you're driving it a little bit different than everyone else, and this is why it's either gaining you or losing you sometime. A very common thing that I see with people is that as the tires start wearing off, they're still doing their normal corner entry from the beginning of the race, which causes them over time to miss corner entry by more and more and more. As long as you're keeping your grip off the corner, you should be fine.
I still have it, it's just I'm plowing a little bit.
Just instead of just lifting, do like a tiny brake tap up top. The goal of a good spotter slash coach slash crew chief in a race is to provide the most information to your driver while being as unintrusive as possible, because if you start going too much, start overflowing them with information or being distracting, that's when they can start making mistakes because of you, and that's the last thing you want. The last way that having a spotter in iRacing can be extremely beneficial is through strategy. Having somebody that can not only set your own strategy, but compare your strategy to everyone else's. We already talked about this with tire strategy, but what about with fuel strategy and pit stop strategy? A lot of good spotters and crew chiefs have a good feel for how races go. They've just gone through so many of them. They know, okay, it's been this many laps, so we take tires. It's been this many laps, so we don't take fuel, stuff like that. But even if you aren't that used to that, you can still be very helpful by studying the lap times across a run. A good rule of thumb is outside of green-white checker scenarios, you want to pit when you have more than a 2 or 3/10 disparity between your tires and brand new tires. At only 1/10 of a second, you can aero block the car behind you in a way that makes their tires not very beneficial. So that's great. At 2/10, you're starting to push it. And then at 3/10, if you're at a multi-groove track, you can get past really easily. But even if you're at a single groove track, you can probably get away with it. But anytime that your current lap times before a caution is 3+ tenths behind what it would be pitting, it is just not smart to stay out. Another question that I get a lot is, how do I decide 2 tires? So my rule of thumb for this might not be the same for everybody, but I have a couple rules that determine when I take 2 tires. Basically, the requirements for me to take 2 tires is that the track has to build tight into the run, and then at the same time, it has to be a single groove racetrack. The problem with these scenarios is that on a loose racetrack, two tires will make your car even looser. So you'll just have no grip, and the rubber that you do have isn't being used very efficiently, and your lap time will plummet and you'll be very easy to pass. On multi-groove racetracks like Michigan, Chicago, something like that, if you take two tires there, even if you're able to more or less hang with people for a little bit, once they gain that advantage on you, they'll be able to just drive around you and pick a line that you're not in, and they won't even be able to notice that you're there pretty much. Another huge factor with two tires is you should never take fuel with two tires. Almost ever. I don't think I've ever done that before. Because, as we're going to get into right now, fuel is actually one of the best handling adjustments that you can make in a NASCAR Fixed Series race. And that sounds kind of silly at first until you realize that fuel is just a big weight in the left rear of the car. So that when your car is getting loose, that extra weight is going to make it come around even more. At a track that is single groove, you can take two tires and counteract that looseness without taking fuel. And from there, you can maybe be able to hold on with two tires. The place that I've found the most success with this strategy is Nashville. I'm sure there are a couple more as well, especially on late race restarts with less than 10 to go. I won't get into open series adjustments because that's just not my forte, and someone else can cover that if they want to. But for fixed series races, a good time to suggest brake bias adjustments to your driver throughout the race is if they are getting super loose on entry and you feel like that they are entering at a reasonable pace and a reasonable distance, then you can tell them that they can raise their brake bias to kind of tighten up that entry. On the flip side, if you feel like they're missing their entry and they're not really turning down to the bottom as they should, and at the same time you think that they're doing the turn in early enough, that's when you can recommend to lower the brake bias. If you find that a car is really loose on short run, then you might not want to fuel for a late race restart. If you want the car to be rotating more throughout the race, you fill up every time you come into pit. And these are adjustments that the driver can make all the same as a crew chief, but sometimes having a neutral party pair of eyes to see what's going on can really help the driver make the right decisions. The last thing that crew chiefs really help with is long run pit strategy, green flag pit stops, being able to see how the math checks out and what the best strategy is for the driver. A spotter and a crew chief can see how the tire fall off has happened over the course of the run very easily. If the fall off is less than a second, even like half a second over the course of a run, you could tell your driver to short pit a green flag pit stop and try to get some track position. Whereas if you see that the tire fall off is like 2+ seconds over the entire run, you can say, okay, we're going to need to make this tire stretch so that we can even out the stops. Ultimately, decisions are different for every race, but the spotter and crew chief has more information to help make a more educated decision, which still may or may not work out, but it is a huge advantage to have a second pair of eyes and a second brain that doesn't have to worry about turning left. And you put that all together and you have a quality spotter in iRacing. Now you know why some people pay to have a decent spotter up in their box for big races. Well, anyways, thank you all for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day, and hope to see you all on the track.